For the third time in 14 months, Innsbruck, Austria is hosting a World Cup luge competition, and that's not a bad thing. This is certainly one of the most beautiful places in the world, definitely in the world of luge. Hi again, everyone. I'm Tim Singer. Welcome to the Eberspeche World Cup on a picture-perfect morning in the Tyrolean Alps. Fahrenheit-wise, that temperature is 36 degrees with the ice just below zero, and the runner temperatures on the bottom of the luge sled sitting at right about freezing with their standard temperature for today's race. As for today's race, the lower start area, once again, as we get ready for the women's competition, into the Kreisel and winding their way down a track that was challenging, to say the least, for many of the men in yesterday's singles and doubles. Right now, to tell us a little bit more about the track and today's competition, I'm pleased to introduce from Team USA, Olympic medal winning Gordy Scheer. Welcome back, Gordy.
Good morning, Tim. What a great track this is. It's one that rewards smoothness and gliding as opposed to hard driving. You really want to be very precise, be super relaxed, maintain perfect aerodynamic position. This is curve 9, where we may see some action today, and it sets up the lower labyrinth, which is very much about a rhythm and relaxation and really just letting the sled do its thing. And that is going to be the key areas and key skills in this race.
The track record for men's singles fell yesterday, and we'll see if it can happen again today. Slightly warmer day, it may be a challenge. 28 will be up to that challenge, especially those in the back end of this draw, so to speak, the seeded group, where we will be keeping a very close eye on two Germans, Geisenberger and Tobitz, on the last page of your start list. They are separated by less than 75 points in the World Cup standings. There are 3 World Cup races remaining. Geisenberger leading over Tobitz, and they will decide that championship. It will be between the two of them. Tobitz, the defending World Cup champion and winner of 5 races this year, and Natalie Geisenberger, the multi-time World Cup overall champion, who won the race last week in Oberhof. But we get started way on the other end of the spectrum with a young athlete in just her 3rd World Cup race, Yuliana Tonitska of the Ukraine, 17 years old.
Yeah, being 17 and competing in your first World Cup is quite an achievement. I think we're seeing a lot more of that this year due to the fact that there is no Junior World Cup Tour this year. So a lot of these younger athletes are trying to get experience racing on the World Cup Tour, and especially at a track like Eagles, which is relatively easy.
And she handles curve 9 not bad. This is the curve 10 high wall into the lower labyrinth. She had a 15th place finish in her World Cup debut in Königssee 3 weeks ago, which is not a bad way to break onto the scene.
Oh, that's a really respectable result, especially at that age.
40.724, also good training times all week for this young Ukrainian. So we'll see how this holds out against the remainder of the first group, those who qualified 2 days ago in the Nations Cup.
This is the entrance into the finish curve, curve 14. Goes steep uphill at the very end.
Her finish time is about a full second behind the track record that was set by Tobitz in November of 2018. It's a 39.745. All right, moving along now. Competitor number 2. Other end of the spectrum, Gordy. We go from a 17-year-old to Raluca Stramaturau, 35 years old, and with the retirement of the start record holder, Tatiana Hofner, Raluca is now the senior woman on tour.
You can see her settling to the left, which is a little bit problematic, not ideal. Makes for a little bit of a harder drive going into that start curve, which is particularly challenging. A few years back, they modified this track to address the even harsher start angle. It's a little bit better, but still definitely a challenge point, an area to watch during this race.
Raluca, when not luging, is an avid hiker, trekker, mountain climber. And Gordy, as you know, she's come to the right place because you've got a day off in Eagles. There's plenty of trekking to be had.
And it's just gorgeous here. Absolutely beautiful area of the world.
This is the uphill finish curve. The Romanian is 0.2 of a second or so ahead of the first sled, Raluca Stramaturarou. Looking for a bit of a comeback late this season as she struggled and missed several races as well.
Exiting curve 9, very nice job. A little bit of a position check there. You want to really let the sled run on those straightaways as much as possible. In luge, you want to do all of your driving in the curves and not necessarily on the flats unless you absolutely have to.
Green light for Raluca. No one to ham it up to down at the finish area other than the camera operator because it's very sparse due to the social distancing. Klaudia Damaracka of Poland, starter number 3 this morning in Eagles. She did not qualify for the main draw at the opening race in Innsbruck in November, but has been a pretty regular performer through Nations Cup, making it into the main field ever since. Her best result at 20th in Oberhof, the first Oberhof race.
And you notice the difference between her start and Raluca's. As she settled, the sled drifted to the right, makes it a little bit easier to drive that start curve and cut that angle, and then you're driving just a little bit less distance. This is a beautiful run so far, even though the clock may not reflect it.
There's an interesting point about that start. It's so challenging. We'll take a closer look with the next competitor, who's actually a pretty quick starter. And we'll talk about whether you can be too aggressive with the paddles. 40.623. And while we have a moment, our warmest welcome to everyone tuning in around the world this morning, the live streaming of World Cup Luge. You can chat with us on Twitter at Luge Announcer, on Gmail, luge.announcer. We'd love to hear from you. And this is the Kreisel.
Yeah, and before that, it was a great shot of the start entry angle. And if you heard, it was interesting. Her sled was whistling.
Wow, a happy sled. Next up, we have Ekaterina Baturina, the first of the 4 Russians in today's race. And Gordy, to my point a moment ago, she's a quick starter, strong at the top, tall athlete. Can you be too aggressive? I think that's a rhetorical question. You can be with that wall lurking, right?
Well, if you can get the sled over, bring it right, and hit the drive to minimize that entry angle into the corner. I mean, if you're carrying a lot of speed, it's going to be a little harsher, but I'd rather have that speed than not have it. That was a nice start. So you're putting her hands, adjusting her position. It's tricky to go from the start position, take those 3 paddles, settle into your sled, and then drive. You're doing that in a relatively short distance.
Baturina's 3 stellar teammates are among the seeded group, including the last 2 to come down today. Ivanova, of course, a 2-time race winner this season. Still in the green as she tries to fight her way onto the World Championship roster. 40.424. Those Worlds, the biggest event of the year, take place next weekend, not far from here in Königssee, Germany.
It's about a roughly 2-hour drive.
Which, that may be the shortest drive between any 2 tracks in the world, right?
Yeah, it is.
Maybe Oberhof and Altenburg. I think that's a little farther. All right, 4 Russians in today's event, also 4 Americans, and we welcome back to the tour Emily Sweeney, who has just 1 result this season, her 10th place finish in Königssee, as she patiently waited the first half of the season. The North Americans did not compete in Europe. Headed over, raced 1 time, then had to go back home for military obligations. but has gotten the clearance we expect Gordy to race for the rest of the season.
Yeah, she should be clear, and it was not so much obligations, but more restrictions.
That's exactly right, yep. Emily with 3 paddles and a pretty smooth settle. Fastest start time, but she has a tap.
Yeah, she got, I think, a little too aggressive on the start curve and may have driven herself into a skid. We'll see what the 18 split looks like. Oh, she definitely lost some time, but if she can have a good run, she can hopefully minimize the damage.
On balance, she is generally a lot faster than those who have gone down so far, and she picks up her speed usually down here at the bottom of the course.
True, little lateral skid, but I mean, it's a nice looking run.
40.310. So an early lead for Emily, but not without some little errors that might cost her places in the standings. In a race, Gordy, where only the top 15 can get into the race later today, the sprint.
Okay, so on the start curve here, she's I don't know that I would have steered as hard as she did, and it just brought the sled to a slight skid, but then the rest of the run was actually really nice. Little direction off to the left out of 9. Ooh, see a little more direction than I thought from this camera angle.
Sweeney Dunn, as she's being helped by Matt Oakes, the team trainer. And back to the top we go for another North American who has had just limited racing action this year, Caroline Maxwell from Canada, her 3rd race. 4th race back, but she did not qualify for the main draw in one of them. 20-year-old from Calgary.
Yeah, it's a bummer that the track in Calgary is no longer in operation, because that really is just such a great facility and so important to sliding not only in Canada but North America as a whole.
A bummer, not just for sliding, just bummer because it's such a great place to go. Have a nice fat steak at the Keg City nearby.
Yeah.
Maxwell trailing the American by a significant amount here, although Emily Sweeney had a skid right here on the finish curve. So Maxwell staying about the same distance behind. In fact, in 3rd place right now, it's USA, Russia, and Canada. We're just 6 sleds into this 28 sled field opening run of the World Cup women's singles competition.
Little skid off the exit of curve 11 into curve 12, but otherwise not too shabby done in the lower labyrinth. She also had a little direction coming out of curve 9 as well. That left direction. You want to minimize that distance between the 2 curves, 9 and 10.
2 thumbs up from Marcus Prock, the sport director and president of the Austrian Luge Federation, as he looks to the top and looks to his daughter, 20-year-old Hannah Prock. She'll turn 21 in 2 weeks, and she has had as high as a 5th place finish this year. In fact, Gordy, she's done it twice, both in the 2 prior sprint competitions. So you know her goal here is the top 15 on her home track, because she could fare well later today.
Well, that's certain. She's got that driving ability. Her start will develop over time, but she's had a lot of runs down this track, no doubt. The home track advantage is very important in this sport.
Picture perfect exit out of curve 9, and she's handling curve 10 with a great line as well.
Beautiful.
She should move into the green here.
I would be shocked if she didn't.
Still remains in the red though, and she does. She finds green down at the bottom. That was just because of those smooth lines, 40.269. Small athlete, right, Gordy? So she can't necessarily rely on that momentum down at the bottom with the weight to pick up the speed.
Yeah. So this is the entry to the start curve. It's a since that portion of the track is not in use, they can drop a camera right there. There's no sleds coming from up above. And the exit of 9, gorgeous position. Nice straight line, middle to middle right entrance into curve 10. It was nicely done.
Hanna Prock into the lead, and Nina Ziegler getting ready at the top. Between the two of them, their fathers have captured 20 World Cup overall titles. 20, Gordy. Two guys.
One World Cup title is a huge accomplishment. 20.
Congratulations to you. You have one or two, right?
Just one.
Okay.
A little uneven on the start.
One of the slower starters in today's race. 8th fastest of the 8 so far. That's not Nina Ziegler's strong suit, even though it was one of her fathers. Of course, he was the complete package, Armin.
Yeah. The start is obviously key, the only place you can accelerate the sled. Everywhere else you're minimizing friction. So if you have problems at the start, it multiplies in your time down at the bottom.
Smooth run, 6th place time, 40.542. A little disappointing for Dad because this is a track where Ziegler is very comfortable and has probably had her most runs. It'll be interesting to see how the track conditions are all day long.
Again, making that transition from sitting upright and paddling the sled to laying down, all while that start curve is staring you in the face. It's a little bit of a pressure cooker. So, you know, you want to, that's where experience really comes into play. And even for the best athletes, they can have some issues there.
There have been very few crashes this weekend, which has been a great sign. Unfortunately for you, Gordy, 2 of those 3 crashes were provided by American sleds. But it does mean that the track is in pretty good shape. And a far cry from 2 years ago where there were a lot of complaints from the athletes. They had to bring in a track crew from Germany to smooth things up. But all good so far this weekend. Here's Natalie Mogg of Switzerland.
That sled can turn. Yeah, you know, it's worth considering the importance of a good track crew. These tracks are all maintained by hand. There's no Zamboni like you would see at an ice rink.
Right.
You know, we talk about St. Moritz being a mile-plus long ice sculpture with no refrigeration. All these tracks are really ice sculptures. They're maintained by hand, and a good track crew makes all the difference.
Gordy, can you get your inventor friends and your venture capitalists on board and create a luge and bobsled track Zamboni machine?
Not a lot of money in that proposition.
When you only have 16 facilities or so around the world, you're not going to turn much of a profit, right?
I don't think so.
Natalie Mogg in 3rd place right now behind the Austrian and the American.
Exiting curve 11, nicely done. This is really about rhythm. You can almost feel Wolfgang Schadler, talked about a swing effect almost. Up, down, up, down, up, down. There's definitely a rhythm and a feel to that section of the course.
So Mogg from Switzerland is through. She spent the first half of the year among the seeded group before dropping out in the points, as did this woman, Ulla Zerna, the first of the Latvians. And Gordy, yesterday in the 2 men's races, you were raving about the Latvian sleds and their speed down at the bottom of this track.
Not to minimize the Latvian sliding skills. They all look good on the sled. But yes, they are definitely dialed in. They're one of 4 nations that really seem to be at the forefront right now of sled setups and technology. The others being the Austrians and the Germans and the Russians.
Serna keeping it close, 300s behind Proc right now, so if the Latvian sleds perform as they did yesterday, then this could turn green late, but it does not. It's close, but it's just behind Sweeney of the USA in third place. Hanna Proc, the Austrian, continuing to lead the way.
This is Eagles, so racing is going to be very tight. Interesting, there's a couple little bumps that are definitely forcing the sleds to rock back a little bit. You can see in that slow motion camera angle, you really see the sleds articulating, and it's a good illustration of how there's a bow shape to those runners that allows the sleds to kind of rock back and forth and actually allows the sled to steer.
Your longtime teammate, three-time Olympian Duncan Kennedy, would sometimes advocate for more bumps on the tracks that he felt were lacking in challenge. I'm not sure many would agree with that.
I don't know. Sometimes it's good. I think, Duncan always loves the challenge, so.
Alina Vitola joined this Latvian team mid-season. I believe this is just her third race. She had a 5th in Königssee and then a DNF, which I don't remember whether or not that was a crash in Sigulda. More likely than not in Sigulda, right?
Sigulda has a different character than this track here at Eagles. Sigulda track is really a driver's track, so you see a lot of Latvians coming out of that system of development with great driving skills.
This 20-year-old had the second fastest start time and the second fastest down time, a 40.308. Incidentally, Emily Sweeney of the United States still carrying the fastest start mark with a 2.122.
The 2-second start time really doesn't reflect the start curve. You can see there's 2 red lines. That 2-second mark is between those 2 red lines, and then the 18-second split or thereabouts is at the exit of Kreisel.
More telling?
Yeah, that really takes into account it tells the story of the start curve.
Speaking of timing placements on this track, as we introduce you to Marian Oberhofer, the first of the Italians getting ready to start, 888 meters above this point. There she is. We have a question from Craig, good for a question just about every day. Gordy, how come all of the luge, bob, or skeleton races place the finish line before the final curve of the track?
Well, that has to do with slowing down. In luge, there are no brakes. In bobsled and skeleton, and bobsled there are brakes, but you need them because there's a lot of momentum. So those last curves are frequently used to help scrub speed off.
That's a great point. And there are some, I'm not sure you were ever at the old bobsled track in Cortina, but that out ramp was probably 300 meters long, steep uphill. So if you crashed before the finish curve, you weren't going to make it back up that hill.
Interestingly, Lake Placid's finish curve for luge, the eye is before curve 19. For bobsled, it's at the exit of curve 19.
Interesting. 8th place time for Oberhofer, who's actually the second of the 2 Italians, neither of them sliding with distinction yet. We have one more still to come out of the qualifying group, and then just one from South Tyrol among the seeded group, but Andrea Vetter could contend later today.
Kreisel, those blue lines are used for our reference point, not for the sliders. That basically, in that Kreisel corner, you want to drive twice. Once in the beginning, basically one third of the way through, let it ride, and then drive it out in the last third. And I have to correct myself, by the way. In Lake Placid, it's exit of curve 19 for luge, exit of 20 for bobsled.
Okay. The second of the USA, always sporting the glitter on the face. This is Brittany Arndt, originally from Wisconsin. Now calls her home Park City, Utah, where there's one track with the United States Luge Federation. And Brittany spends most of her time in Lake Placid, where the other USA track is located.
As well as the indoor start training facility, which was recently renovated. A complete redo of the ramps where the U.S. team trains.
When's the last time you were there? Oh, right now.
That's where I'm broadcasting from.
Nice moving from the red to the green for Brittany Arndt.
Nice looking run for Brittany.
Her best result was a 12th place in Sigulda, carrying pretty good speed, 67.7. That ties for the fastest of the morning.
Very nice lines through the lower labyrinth.
40.225, Brittany Arndt of the USA into the lead. We are 13 sleds in, nearly halfway through this 28 sled first run. She seems happy.
Oh, she should be. It was definitely just a solid run all the way around. Good driving lines.
Looks as if the sled's hopping a little bit up and down, those bumps, which we spoke about.
And she didn't have her hand into the sled just yet, but she's able to just stay cool.
And it's
she's
not
got her left hand in, which is more important because you apply a little pressure with that left shoulder to get around that start curve.
Maybe she wanted to wave to the spectators and realized, oh, there are no spectators.
Some words with Robert Fegg, her head coach.
This is Fegg's first year as the senior national team coach, former junior world champion from Germany, now coaching the USA. Verena Hoffa, 19-year-old Italian, the third of four.
Yeah, a little rough. She settled to the right, and you could hear the noise of the sled cutting ice in the start curve. And that's a tough pill to swallow. I've raced on this track and made that mistake. You just know there's not much that you can do after that other than try and have a good run and build as much speed as possible.
Which she's doing since that mistake. She was very nice out of curve 9, now in the lower S's.
This is her home track. The Italians are close by, all South Tyroleans.
Armin not at all happy with the performance of all three Italians, who among the first 14 that have come down, they sit in 9th place, 11th place, and 12th place. They've been coached a lot, Gordy, on the start, and the starts have improved for the Italians, but can it be a little too much too soon if you don't have the settle down?
Well, it's, if you're 19, you're prone to make these kinds of mistakes, and it's a learning experience for her. Very few athletes can perform so comfortably at an early age. It's the exceptional few that can be that good so quickly.
Well, we are down to our podium finishers now. The top 3 from Friday's Nations Cup qualifying event. They needed to perform well just to get into today's race, and these are those who performed the best. Cheyenne Rosenthal, the first of 4 Germans in today's competition. This is her return to action. She hasn't raced since mid-December, when she had a 9th place finish at the first Oberhof race. Anna Bierreiter took over for Cheyenne in the last 4 races and frankly performed quite a bit better. So this is Rosie's opportunity to try to get into next week's World Championship, and I think she has a hard road ahead because Bierreiter's home track is Königssee.
She had a little bit of bump at the exit of the start curve. I don't think it cost her too much, but, well, looks like we're starting to bleed a little time here. Maybe it is going to reflect further down the track, but it's 9,000, so it's going to be tight.
This could go either way.
Yeah.
Cheyenne Rosenthal, 2/1000ths of a second out of the lead of Brittany Arndt. So it's USA, Germany, Austria, Latvia, USA. That's the top 5. 2 more remaining here among the qualifying group. 13 sleds all told.
Not an ideal exit in terms of how the sled was performing. The line was okay, but she was just carrying a lot of strange pressure. You could see ice coming up lateral motion causing ice to cut and slide in time to just kind of bleed away on the exit of curve 9.
The first of the Germans, the other 3 will be forces in today's race, coming up a little later on. Eidberger, Tobitz, and Geisenberger. Now Lisa Schulte, in her 4th year on the national team, she's had steady results, but by far her best finishing placings have been here on her home track, where she finished 6th in November and 6th last season as well.
Yeah, home ice is a big thing. As I said earlier, the comfort level that you have on your home track and just the ability to have been through every possible scenario. Nice exit of curve 9. But that ability to understand every possible scenario and deal with it in a sort of relaxed manner is really key. She's bleeding time here. I'm not quite sure where it's going.
4th place with a 40.301. I have no idea, Gordy. It all looked good, but as you know, and as we talk about every week, how the sled and more specifically the runners are set up for today's condition is no small matter.
I was going to say maybe at the starts the only place. Yeah, that was not too bad. I'm at a little bit of a loss here.
Schulte through with run number 1. She will likely be sitting right there on the bubble to try to stay in the top 15 after the second heat and make it to the final race of the weekend, which is the sprint competition. Now the winner of Friday's Nations Cup race, another of several athletes among this group who have spent most of the year with the seeded athletes. This is Kendia Apariota. 22nd place finish at the Olympic Games for the Latvian. She had a very unfortunate crash on her home track in Sigulda. That was a bit of a surprise. Not as surprising was her second career podium in Oberhof in December. She looked great in that race.
Yeah, definitely someone with a lot of talent. Very, very strong slider, good driver. So she should be a threat to the fastest time set by Brittany Arndt.
Really have had very little in the way of incident out of curve 9 by anyone. A couple of redirections, as we saw from Sweeney, but it's been pretty smooth.
Yeah, I like what I'm seeing. I also like what I'm hearing. It sounds awfully quiet.
That's a great point. 40.201. The Latvian takes over the lead. We've made it through the qualifiers. Now, as I like to say, the big kids are getting out of school for recess in just a moment. But it's Latvia, Apariota, leading over Arndt of the USA and Rosenthal of Germany.
Through the lower labyrinth. Nice form, maybe sitting up just a little bit, maybe slightly offline. Perhaps that's why she was shaking her head coming up the outrun.
9 different women have earned podiums this year on the World Cup, including Kendia Apariota, and certainly including Diana Eidberger. In her return to the sport after a year off, Eidberger has a victory in Oberhof and a trio of third-place finishes this season, 2 of them here at the opener in Innsbruck in November. Very confident settle there.
Definitely. It's been interesting to track the return of Eidberger and Geisenberger as well. Slightly different rates of return in terms of their performance, with Eidberger slightly lacking behind.
But just slightly. Fourth in the World Cup standings.
Yeah, that's nothing. That's not a slouch.
Making it a race here, green to red, back to green. Can she open it up? She does by 0.04 of a second, maybe closer than comfort. Although that's about as satisfied a look as you usually see from Norbert Locke, at least in run one.
Yeah, she left a little bit on the table coming out of curve 9. See her really leaning in with that left shoulder and driving with that right leg to get around that start curve. Probably the hardest drive on this track. And there was out a little bit too soon, didn't use enough of curve 9 and tapped that right wall.
The new mom safely down, and she's thinking about the mistakes she made. We'll get our translators on that in a second. Now this is going to be interesting to see. Andrea Vetter first making a run at Tatjana Hofner, her new coach's start record, 2.03. Let's see how she does here. 2.11, so still 800ths off of that record. Agla could also challenge later today.
Beautiful form going into the Kreisel. Her head is completely buried. Her home track, again. Wow.
Everything,
really nice.
Everything down the middle, right?
Really, really nice looking run. And bravery, too. Just completely burying her head. You have to be able to see the driving line, so that's a tremendous amount of self-trust, but drops a little bit, Tim.
Just 100th down at the bottom. By far the best performance of the 4 Italians. Now, that's not a big surprise. Without Sandra Robacha in the field this year, Andrea has sort of stood alone among the 4 Italian women.
Good start. Settles middle. She could have been a little bit more middle right. Would have helped her a hair. Maybe given her a couple hundredths additional. But nice form. Confidence of sliding on your home track.
It's Germany, Italy, Latvia, USA. That's the top 4 right now. Well over halfway through the field now. In fact, starter number 20 getting ready. At the top is the final American. Actually, not the final American, one after. This is Summer Britcher, whose 19th place finish at the Olympic Games in 2018 is a little misleading, inconsistent to say the least, because she had a lot of trouble in some of the heats, but she also had the fastest run of the week when she was on.
And a track record.
That's which she still holds.
Well, that was a nice save. She settled a little to the left and actually brought the sled over. I don't know how she did that. That's pretty impressive. She really made the best of a potentially devastating situation right there. That was awesome.
Since the retirement of Erin Hamlin, Summer has probably been the most consistent men's or women's finisher in terms of results over the past 3 or 4 years, including twice in the top 3 in the World Cup overall standings.
She's building some speed here. This is a good run.
The American crosses with a 40.075, 2 from the USA in the top 5 at the moment, led by Summer Britcher, as she has an 800th of a second advantage over Diana Eitberger of Germany. Between them, they have over 10 World Cup victories in their career.
Boy, she just cranked that sled. A little bit of skidding, so she lost some time there, but what a... I am impressed with her ability to save that. That was really good, and the rest of the run was very solid. See her dropping her head going into curve 8.
USA out in front of Germany, and the final American is ready at the top. It's 21-year-old Ashley Farquharson. Ashley sliding out of the seeded group for the first time this season. And in fact, it's been a rare occasion over her 3 seasons that Ashley's been among the seeded group. So You know, that's a big challenge now for when you get there, is you want to stay there, right, Gordy?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But Ashley really had a great race last weekend.
And she had a great race here in Innsbruck last season, where she was on the podium, in podium position, I should say, after the first run before dropping back a bit, but it was still a top 10.
She was flirting with disaster on the start curve, but did nice to bring it back.
600ths back at that last split. If she can maintain that, this will be a top 3 result. She's losing time.
Yeah, a little. I think this may be a result partially of that start curve.
Nonetheless, 40.201 for Ashley Farquharson. That puts her in 4th place with 7 still to come. So it's possible, Gordy, that the USA can have 2 in the top 10 here at the end of the run.
I think that would be pretty solid. Dropped a little bit out of curve 9. But she does nice to keep it on course. I think I saw a little bit of ice being cut here in the labyrinth, but a beautiful entrance into curve 14. Nice and smooth on.
Warm conditions this morning outside of Innsbruck. And when we say outside of Innsbruck, it's probably about 12 miles from downtown Innsbruck. Straight uphill.
Straight up.
Yeah, but think about the route that the Grinch takes to go back home from Whoville. That's Innsbruck to Eagles. Now, Ekaterina Katnikova, the defending world champion, she has proudly worn that bib for the last 51 weeks, and she will get an opportunity to defend that title next week in Königssee.
Nice setup into the start curve. I think it's going to be a tall order in Königssee for anyone. The Germans home ice. That's going to be a tough race.
It'll be a fun race. It's always a fun course. And yeah, I think you're right, Gordy. Any other nation making it onto the podium in any of those 5 races will perhaps be cause for celebration.
Yeah.
Katnikova to the finish in 2nd place. She trails the American by 0.03 of a second. Not a bad run. Pretty smooth top to bottom.
Yeah, solid for sure. Racing in Eagles, it's always those few hundredths of a second. Less sleds, yeah.
Less than a tenth separate 1 through 4 right now, and then the 2 tied for 5th at the moment are only 12 hundredths back.
It's interesting on the replay, you could see the protrusion at the rear end of her sled, sort of aerodynamic aid that's been put around the shoulders.
No help in this socially distant world we live in, as athlete has to put on mask, take off helmet, carry sled, climb the wall. They're just happy to be taking part. We head now to what they call the super seed. Among the seeded athletes, the final 6 women, based on their results the last 3 weeks. And this is Elitsa Teruma. She is ranked number 6 in the World Cup standings. She had a disappointing 12th in the opening race here in Eagles in November, but came back with a 4th later that day in the sprint. It's amazing, Gordy, the women have been the main draw all season long. I think just about every week they've had the Sunday headlining event.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That's a little bit of a departure. It seems like she's just a little offline down here in the lower labyrinth.
7th place, and that's what offline will do to you, 40.233, especially on this track in Innsbruck, where it's not just stay off of the walls, it's kind of stay in the middle of the track, right?
Yeah, and have those curves flow from one to the other. Try and find as much of a rhythm as you possibly can. Nicely done. But yeah, the rest of the course was just, didn't really seem like she was flowing. Didn't look relaxed on the sled. Little things make such a difference, to your point, Tim.
All right, Gordy, now it gets interesting. American Summer Bridger continues to lead. The final 5, all podium finishers this year. 4 of them are race winners, or 3 of them. And Madeline Egla, who's the first of those 5, is on her home track. She's an Olympic medal winner in team relay. She's finally earned her first 2 podiums this season, and right off the bat, she's made herself the fastest starter in this entire sport. So let's see what Madeline can do here. So to the tunes of the Backstreet Boys, 3 paddles, and it's a 2.109, the fastest start time.
No surprise there. She's really just gained so much skill and strength over the past few years, and she's had that sliding ability, which has also been developing. So 1,000th though, Summer's right up there.
Absolutely.
It's going to be real close.
Yeah, that's a great point. Madeline's gained the strength for sure. She's gained the confidence, which is something she was lacking for a while. She's in the red, losing time to the American on her home track.
Oh, a little bit of cross going to the finish curve.
3rd place. She's kept herself in the hunt, which is something that Madeline's been able to do every week this year. She's been at or near the podium after run 1, week in and week out.
Tough to say where she lost time.
She's one of just 2 women this year on the circuit who has had top 10 finishes in every race. Most of those have been top 5.
Now that's impressive. That's really impressive. She's really come a long way this year. Not just, reaching the podium, which is a huge achievement, but being consistent. That bodes well for years to come, I think.
3rd place right now for the Austrian, trailing an American and a Russian. Now our final 4. And while we celebrate Madeline down below, all eyes on Julia Tobitz of Germany, the defending World Cup champion, the winningest woman in the sport this year with 5 victories. That's not enough to put her on top of the standings, as she's had a couple of down results, but still the most wins, including the first 2 wins of the season here on the Eagles track. She's very Felix Lock-like at the bottom, Gordy. She tends to get in the green and stay there. It'll be interesting to see if that happens today, where it hasn't been a sure thing. So now out of curve 10, opening up the lead, Julia Tobitz, originally from the Altenburg, Saxony region, now slides out of Oberhof into the lead, and by a wide margin, 1200ths. So the Tobitz magic continues in search of win number 6 this year, and perhaps overtaking Geisenberger for the World Cup points. Tobitz in front, Germany leading over USA and Russia. The only thing we haven't seen yet is the big smile that generally comes from Julia down at the bottom. And I guess that's coming up here in a moment. Although I think she may have gotten the red light, and she's still smiling. You gotta love that. It's Germany in front, 3 remain, 1 German, 2 from Russia. And here is the World Cup leader, the two-time Olympic champion, Natalie Geisenberger. 8 second-place finishes and 1 victory so far this year. Geisenberger lives not far from here. In fact, her home of Miesbach is probably just slightly closer to Innsbruck than it is to her home track in Königssee. She is in the green. She's stayed in the green. Actually a 4-time Olympic champion when you throw in the 2 relay golds. And the more things change, the more they stay the same as Geisenberger and Tobitz lead the way. 26 of the 28 have come down here in Innsbruck. Well, we missed you there for a second, Gordy, but great showing by both of these Germans.
No surprise. It's a lot of experience, a lot of know-how, great coaching, great athletes. And there's honestly, it's not a mystery.
Germany, USA, Russia. That's the top 4 right now, and the hits just keep on coming for Natalie Geisenberger. Somewhat relieved to be near home, near her husband Marcus and their new baby, Leo. And now we have our final 2, and both of these, Gordy, could contend here. These 2 Russians. Demchenko always makes it interesting, Demchenka, rather. And if she can stay near the middle of this track, she'll contend, and certainly to follow, Ivanova will be a medal contender today.
Settles nicely into the sled. 5 thousandths back, which is not much. She can keep it down the middle. As you said, she will be in contention. See that right foot bent in when she's driving. That disrupts airflow just a bit. Nice driving out of curve 9.
Victoria back in 10th place in the World Cup standings, in part because her biggest crash of 2 this year, one of them came on a sprint weekend. And that's where she sits in 10th place. Gordy, I didn't see a lot of major mistakes there.
No, neither did I. Maybe it's a sled setup issue, or maybe she's driving too much on the sled. It's very hard to tell sometimes from this vantage point. Could have driven the sled a little bit more there. High, too peaky in the start curve. But I don't see anything major.
If baseball is a game of inches, then luge is a game of millimeters.
That's very accurate.
Forlorn expression from Victoria Demchenko of Russia. Now the only woman not wearing a German uniform to win races this year on the Eberspecher World Cup, Tatiana Ivanova. She took first in Altenburg, first again in Sigulda. Those were her 15th and 16th career World Cup victories. Gordy, she has the type of game that is suited for this track, although her results in Innsbruck haven't been too good. She crashed, in fact, in November and finished 20th.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, for whatever reason, she just has that Altenburg track wired. It's very interesting to watch. And in Eagles, falling 700s back behind Geisenberger. Nothing out of the ordinary here, but losing a lot of time. I think perhaps this is just a Russian setup issue with their sleds. Yeah.
I mean, Katnikova's in the hunt, but no other Russians are. 15th place on the bubble right now, 40.276 for Tatiana Ivanova. who would just assume maybe never come back to Innsbruck again.
Yeah, that's uncharacteristic based on her driving ability, her past history,
Her strength.
her strength. Yeah, it seems out of character. Again, nothing sticking out at me screaming, oh, there's a couple tenths of a second that she's losing. Decent down to 9. That's how it goes sometimes.
Ivanova brings to an end run number 1 from Eagles Austria. It's an interesting leaderboard. The 2 strongest in the world remain that way as Geisenberger leads over Tobitz. Summer Britcher poised to give the USA its best result of the season. Don't count out Katnikova, the world champion, Egla, and Eitberger, who are all strong on this track, although they're a little further back in the standings. The USA, meantime, have 3 sitting in sprint position right now among the top 15. Cheyenne Rosenthal can also hang tight for a second run later today. And Ivanova, surprisingly, on the bubble, sitting in 15th place. Gordy, your run number 1 thoughts?
A very solid performance across the board from the women, and I think we're looking at a very exciting second heat. And I would obviously I'm perhaps less than neutral on this, but I think Summer could move up a slot.
That'll be fun to see. Some new blood on the podium as she'll try to be the 10th different woman from 5 different countries to make it onto the podium. All of those questions will be answered here in the beautiful Tyrolean Alps when we return to action just over a half hour from now. Run number 2 coming up soon from Innsbruck, Austria.